What are some red flags that made you leave the relationship? Constantly accused me of cheating or that I was going to leave her because I was getting serious about my weight loss and health. She asked me if I had a bank account a few days in the relationship and said she wanted to link accounts so we shared the money, and I was immediately put off by that, and on top of that she had a problem with me not wanting to be in an open relationship. She was always checking my phone if I left it laying around. I'd wake up from a nap and she would be looking through my phone. I gave her the passcode because I had nothing to hide. When I finally had enough, I asked her to show me her phone and she refused and guarded it like Fort Knox. When we were just starting out, we ran into some unexpected financial difficulties. We had to borrow money from my parents to make rent 1 month. I was vocal about how much I hated doing it and how badly I wanted to pay them back as soon as possible. He took some of the money, bought an expensive bottle of high-quality alcohol and hid it for me. He was not working at the time. When, instead of apologizing after being caught lying, he met another girl on the internet to show me how easy it was to get another woman to talk to him if I wouldn't, but he still expected to work things out. He told me to accept that he is a playboy and that he is always honey, because he is a Scorpio. He said to me after having had periods of suicidal thoughts in the past, "I decided last night I couldn't kill myself unless I killed you first, so you wouldn't have to live with the guilt." That felt like a red flag. He ruined every big event. He had an attitude that didn't let you enjoy anything. He would act happy and excited leading up to said event, then just ruin it. A friend of mine sat me down one day and told me she'd been smoking pot with him. He was a dealer at the time, and telling him how bad she wanted him, basically begging him for Shreks. He turned her down every time, but admitted he wanted to be with her and didn't think I deserved to be cheated on. He made it clear he was interested, but also that he wouldn't come between us. So it was my decision how things went. She denied it, but I dumped her shortly afterward and she started dating him maybe a week later. He was kind of an ass most of the time, but I've always appreciated him giving me the heads up, instead of just letting her cheat and me be none the wiser. She showed up at my job. But what's crazier is that I never told her where I worked. Calling my house every 5 minutes until I picked up. And then there was "don't blame yourself if anything happens to me." When I moved for work and felt my mental health returning, I thought I was happier because I moved to a city I wanted to be in. But instead I discovered that each time she visited I wasn't happy about it. I had a pretty big breakdown after she broke up with me. But after that, the world seemed brighter. Probably due to the lack of gaslighting. She fricked other men and refused to admit it. When I finally confronted her with incontrovertible evidence, she refused to end it. So after 32 years, I filed for divorce. During high school, she accused me of getting her pregnant when I picked her up at her house, in front of her family. Note that it was a blind date with someone I had never even met before. Probably when I told them I needed them to come to couples therapy with me, because I was tired of having the same arguments and I was miserable because of these issues we were having, and the response was to look me dead in the face and say I don't want to go, because they'll just tell me I'm wrong and I don't want to have to change. Hit me then that they didn't actually care if I wasn't happy, just that they were. Hard to misinterpret when they literally say it to you. When I was gone, she sat on my roommate's bed and told him he would be a good father to her son. She then spread her legs. Can't get much more red flaggy. Finding out I was unwittingly in a three-way relationship as the emotional support component, second man to the first man's physical component, the hard way. With her it was lots of talk, cuddling, dates and playful light over the close touching, but never any further than that. I respected her boundaries enough to never question the issue. I just figured she needed a deeper connection first, and I'm cool with waiting however long my partner needs. Things continued on and eventually, 6 months in, she slipped up and mentioned the man she told me was her ex was coming over after I left. She realized she slipped and I caught it when I questioned her about it, and so confessed that he had been doing it regularly throughout our relationship. Oh, but not to worry, because it wasn't for anything emotional, mostly just getting drunk and having wild, primally satisfying animal instinct Shreks. Being a big fan of both those things, I did not appreciate the deception to say the least. He was a little older than me and well known around the city, a DJ, and he loved taking me and my friends and co-workers out and entertaining us. It was a good time, and I'm the type of person that likes to include people in things they might not have a chance to do again. It was a blast. Then he started taking them out when I wasn't around and entertaining them at her place. He later referred to me as the greatest unintentional wingman he ever met in front of people I knew. Luckily, at least one of my co-workers was a decent person and clued me in. They couldn't stop adopting new pets, like 1-2 new animals a week. We lived in a 2-room flat. I had to bend over backwards to get the smallest amount of effort, like simple good morning, good nights, and goodbyes. At my college boyfriend's apartment, I was doing my calculus homework, and he was working on making a stand for a speaker. In the middle of a fairly tricky problem, he called from the other room asking me to hand him a wrench. I called back in a minute. The next thing I hear is the speaker stand being kicked toward me. I look up at him, and he says, "You're lucky it wasn't you." I was out of there. He constantly talked about his ex-wife. If they went to a certain restaurant for a date, then we couldn't go there. He wasn't over her. It took me a year and a half to finally realize it. He was a very angry man. I realized I needed help and asked for it. Got diagnosed with depression and recommended to stay in one clinic because I was really at the verge of suicide. I called her, explained the situation, and told about the clinic. Her response was, and I quote, "And what will I be doing while you are there?" I noticed she wasn't my partner that moment. We were barely losing to the Jets in the third, and he took off all of his pads and left the stadium. My ex-husband would get moody when my plans would change or when I would come home early from a trip. I ignored it, but something wasn't right. Eventually he just started treating me like I was somehow in his way, still claiming he had been faithful. I left him. Many years later he admitted constant infidelity. It was not a shock. Sometimes you know, even if you don't know you know. She manipulated me to cut off friends and family so I would become completely dependent on her so she could be dependent off of me. She lived in my car. She threw temper tantrums at the slightest things and was a pathological liar and a narcissist. Took me a year to have the courage to finally say enough was enough. She suddenly started an expensive new hobby, cyclocross, then got mad at me for showing up to her meet or race or whatever it was to support her. She was not happy about having to introduce me to this whole new group of like 10 friends. Her cyclocross team that she was suddenly on and had a uniform for and everything. Couple weeks later we break up. Immediately she moves out. I happened to be driving by her new place one morning. I didn't even know where it was, to be honest, but we still lived in the same city, and I recognized her dog. Lo and behold, the guy with her out front first thing in the morning is wearing the silly cyclocross uniform. I suspect she had begun the relationship before breaking up with me, but didn't bother to confirm. She would try to one-up every single thing I told her, even just shoot "Oh yeah, I'm a bit hungover today, man. I'm so much more hungover than you. I drank XNX and smoked." Just stupid shoot. The feeling of if I don't appease this person right now, I might not live until tomorrow was a big red flag. There were lots of others like the attempts to cut me off from any support networks. I thankfully had enough to get me out once I'd accepted that I needed that help and that it was okay to accept the help getting out and that with help we were gonna make a plan. We broke up 2 weeks ago. She used her religion as an excuse to get out of things she didn't like and ignored her religion when it came to things she likes. Told me I couldn't do Elf on the Shelf with my daughter. Yeah? It's dumb, because it's a satanic ritual, but she drinks like a fish. Multiple cosmetic surgeries, body modification and monthly Botox, premarital Shreks, and so on. I don't care if someone is religious, just be consistent. Controlling behavior, that I should wear covered clothes so men wouldn't look at me. It was a very hot summer and I already would wear long skirts to my ankles and tops without cleavage. One time we were eating at a cafe and some drunk dude who was sitting behind me started to talk to me. I didn't even turn to him or acknowledge him, just kept eating. My ex started to fight with him, and then took me by my arm to leave. On our walk back home he was screaming at me how this was all my fault. After 3 years it was my breaking point and I left. She tried to scrape frost from her windshield with a rock from the driveway. Yeah? He straight up refused to let me meet or hang out with his friends, because I wasn't part of the cool clique. We couldn't have a conversation, nothing in common other than the physical. As the plate smashed on the wall I was facing, I turned around and just ducked out of the way of the follow-up plate. It was right after that I questioned how far along the hot crazy graph I was willing to go. Broke up with her and moved states. Met my future wife and we've been together 26 years and married 22. He was incredibly insecure, jealous, and paranoid. He would get extremely angry at me for accidentally looking at another man, usually just zoning out when someone happened to be in front of me, claiming I was doing this to get their attention and/or deliberately embarrass him. He would also continuously accuse me of talking to a whole bunch of different men that I never had, and more. Worst part in all of this was that the more I would try to reason with him and/or even give him proof, the more he would distrust me and the more firmly he would believe these delusions. I really freaking loved him and I knew he was really struggling with his mental health, but he wouldn't get help, and the last time he tried to make accusations against me I knew I couldn't let myself keep going through the emotional abuse.